As defined by the American Library Association, intellectual freedom is the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. This means we are all able to have unencumbered access to the things that interest us for our own inquiry and discovery, so that we may form our own judgment of the ideas or concepts that we may find. Intellectual freedom is super important and goes all the way back to the First Amendment for us here in America. It is our right to be free to be informed and to use that information to form the basis for our own opinions and choices we make. It is part of what makes us a democratic society. Yes, the concept of intellectual freedom dates all the way back to 1791, when the First Amendment was adopted. Of course, this amendment encompasses 5 different constitutional rights, but the right to freedom of speech or freedom of the press are the ones we look to in support of intellectual freedom. It was these crucial liberties over the generations that have made us who we are as a nation. Many years later, in a similar way, to uphold these same inalienable rights, the Library Bill of Rights was adopted. The Library Bill of Rights lays out the foundation for which we are to conduct ourselves as libraries and librarians. It is the underlying principles that make us who we are as a library and the guidelines we must adhere to. We will refer back to this Bill of Rights later in the presentation. Other important documents that have been implemented over the years in support of intellectual freedom are the Freedom to View from the Educational Film Library Assembly 1979 and the American Library Association's Code of Intellectual freedom gains a great deal of support because it is essentially one of the most important aspects to human development. It is a critical component in the process of education. We are able to not only explore the various standpoints and academic ideas presented in its many forms, but we learn how to assimilate this information to become mature, responsible citizens. We can appreciate and tolerate different points of view and also develop our own. In this sense, we become independent free thinkers, better equipped to make our contribution and find our niche in an extremely diverse society. Some of the perceived threats of intellectual freedom are usually involving children. People, usually parents, are afraid of the impact some materials could have on their children. Often it is the case of opinions about appropriate age groups having access to certain concepts, and also the potential harm of unrestrained access to the internet. Other perceived threats might apply to threats to our nation, or any group of people really. There have been instances of material that might support or appear to advocate for some immoral or illegal activities as well, which could potentially pose a threat to not only children, but society as a whole. Entner declares that censorship is a systematic and deliberate exclusion of materials that would be considered protected speech. This exclusion comes from the pressure placed on libraries and other institutions to remove said materials from circulation, or to label the materials that are objectionable, based mostly off of fear. The protected speech he refers to is the First Amendment. In many cases, the ones that are seeking censorship are doing so in an attempt to protect and preserve, as stated in the previous slide. This exclusion might also come deliberately or inadvertently from the people in charge of the collections that are offered due to the selections being made. The American Library Association defines censorship as a suppression of ideas and information that certain persons, individuals, groups, or government officials find objectionable or dangerous. Albeit these may be well-meaning individuals and groups, this suppression of intellectual exchange comes at a price to us all. There are many causes for challenges to materials. The most common complaints are that the content is either sexually explicit or that it has offensive language, or both. Material may also be deemed controversial, such as books or movies that contain racial issues, illegal activities, and/or violence, and that are produced by hate groups. This can be particularly tricky for librarians in an attempt to preserve their collections, even against their own bias. There have been lobbyist groups that have protested some materials stating that there is inaccurate or inappropriate information, sometimes impacting the curriculum of our schools. Other challenges are due to politically sensitive materials or items that contain content that is considered